En esta fría mañana les saludamos para la segunda jornada de esta conferencia mundial del Consejo Global de Turismo Sustentable. Evento internacional que organiza el Servicio Nacional de Turismo Cernatur, el Consejo Global del Turismo Sustentable GSTC y el Gobierno Regional de Aysen. Tal como en el día de ayer, la temática principal de este año en la conferencia de Aysen se centrará en los destinos sustentables, incluyendo su gestión, marketing y certificación, haciendo énfasis en los temas claves abordados por los criterios de sustentabilidad propuestos por el GSTC. Para dar inicio a la ronda de exposiciones, dejo con ustedes al primer taller de esta mañana, el primer panel de esta mañana. Se denomina Turismo y Cambio Climático, Estrategias de Adaptación y Mitigación. Nos acompañará como moderador de este panel el señor Luigi Cabrini, presidente de GSTC, para quien pido un aplauso.
Buenos días, good morning. How's the jet lag treating you, those coming from outside? Okay? Good, you're here, yes, that's good. Well, I think we had a great day yesterday. I really enjoyed the panels and the participation from the public, and I really look forward to another fruitful day today. Let me first, before I introduce the topic, to call on the stage the 4 panelists. And I will start with Dr. Peter Muck, who is the Senior Advisor in Climate Change Adaptation of the Chilean Ministry of Environment. Please, take a seat at the moment. Mr. Blake Rogers, Executive Director, Tourism Industry Association of the Yukon and Canada Country Representative of GSTC. Welcome, Blake. Dr. Ioannis Pappas is the CEO and founder of Green Evolution. He's a member of Board of Directors, country representative of Greece, and also the one that took care of our carbon emission for this conference. Welcome. Mr. Gwendal, Castellan, Sustainable Destination Specialist of Tourist Vancouver. We have 2 sides of Canada today, the north and the south, and we look forward to hear from you. Okay, let me start. See if it works. So, I will only a few slides. I think there are 8 of them.
Parece que aún
most of them based on work done at UNWTO, starting in the year 2007.
tenemos trabajos a partir del 2007, cuando estaba a cargo de sustentabilidad, y uno de los integrantes querían que poner el turismo en la agenda del cambio climático, y hicimos un estudio, creo, de los más profundos hasta el día de hoy sobre el impacto de turismo en el cambio climático y posibles adaptaciones y mitigaciones. Entonces, en estos diapositivos vemos la definición de los hotspots y en las zonas blancas, lo que incluye Sudamérica, las regiones donde había relativamente poca información sobre la infiltración del cambio climático. También hay definiciones solo con sus siglas que están en castellano sobre el impacto relacionado con el turismo, que son los veranos más calurosos, inviernos más fríos, mayor cantidad y intensidad del fenómeno, y justamente lo que está pasando en el Caribe en este momento es ejemplo de eso. Pérdida de biodiversidad, tanto terrestre como marítimo, aumento en precios de seguros y de viajes, y si uno ve lo que está pasando en el Caribe y las grandes inversiones que van a tener que pagar mayores seguros, premios de seguros por la reparación de los daños ocurridos en estos huracanes. Es horrible.
So, what are the impact specifically related to tourism? So, in this chart, it's basically the impact that the different areas which I mentioned before will actually have on the life of an hotel or a resort, or the life of an infrastructure and public services. And you see, marked with yellow, it's kind of a light impact, then middle impact, and strong impact on the red side. So when we look, for example, at water or reef or let's say insurance cost, you will see that compared with the average life of a resort, which is about 50 to 60 years, you will have already in the first 20 years a light impact, then a middle impact, and a strong impact. And I think this is very important if you need to invest in tourism infrastructure. What would be the impact of climate change in your infrastructure, be it public or private, and to be able to plan in advance. As you can see, light impact is already present in most of the tourism resorts. We know already that, for example, some islands in the Caribbean have already problems with the airports because the level of the seas is such that some operations are becoming dangerous. And here you have the flexibility of adaptability of the various tourist actors. So, as a tourist, I have the highest flexibility. If I know that in a place I'm going to find mosquitoes or I'm going to find the beaches disappear because of erosion, I just change my destination. Then you have tour operators and air company that have kind of a bit of a larger scenario, let's say of a few years. And then you have, as I mentioned before, hotel attraction resorts where the flexibility is quite low. So there again, the message is that you have to start planning in advance about the possible consequences of climate change. This table is the result of several weeks or months of work of all the statistical team of the UNWTO, and as far as I know, is the only assessment that was done so far of how much tourism is contributing to climate change. The result was that the number of greenhouse gas emissions produced by tourism is 5% of the total, and of this 5%, about 3/4 is from transport, and within transport the majority come from air transport. And hotels and let's say fixed infrastructure contribute a bit less than 1/4. There was some discussion with the team working on this table, because this is only the net greenhouse gas emissions. There are other effects like radiative effect and we know more about this. But these were not taken into account in order to have a comparable percentage to be compared with other sectors. And so in that study we then presented the scenarios. One scenario which is the business as usual, and which shows that if nothing is done in replacing fossil energy with renewable energy, or in getting more green parameters into the automotive industry, the amount of gas emissions will increase exponentially.
gas
if
va a
there is a
aumentar
combination of what
exponencial.
we call
Pero si
tactical
hay una
efficiencies
combinación
and
de
modal change
eficiencia
into
y
the
cambio
travel
de
business,
modelo,
then there is the
en
possibility
los negocios
to
del turismo
reduce the
existe la
impact of
posibilidad de
tourism
reducir el impacto
in
del
climate
turismo
change.
en el cambio
Up
climático.
to,
Hasta
let's say, a combination of two could actually decrease in the long term.
Incluso podría
And finally, when we're talking
reducir
about
en el largo
mitigation,
plazo
adaptation is
con
how the
una buena
destination
combina
responds.
de
So I
actuación.
would say is the local aspect of climate change.
El
Mitigation
largo plazo,
is
la
how
mitigación
the tourism
es
industry
como la
reduces its
industria
contribution. So it's a global effect.
turística
The fact that you
reduce
reduce
sus
greenhouse gas emission in a
impactos.
place, it doesn't have an effect on that place, but it has a global effect. But I think they're
Si
equally
un
important.
destino
So as far as
reduce sus
transport,
emisiones, va a tener un
the
impacto
ways
global,
on
un
how this
impacto
can be improved is
local.
the renovation
Yo
of
creo
fleets
que
with
para
planes
nuestro
which
negocio, yo creo que
are
cambios,
more efficient,
modernización
investigation
de
of new
las
technologies,
flotas, tanto
alternative
aérea como
kind
de
of fuel,
naves,
with a discussion
uso
about
de
biofuel. Again,
energía
on transport
renovable,
by land
sobre
is
todo
again
en
mostly fuel efficiency,
área de
changes
transporte
consumers'
terrestre,
behavior,
además de
and the
aérea
same on
y
cruise ship.
marítima.
And finally, when
Y
we speak
finalmente,
about hotels
el tema de
in
hoteles de
general,
alojamiento,
then it's about the design
estamos
of the
hablando
new
del
hotels,
diseño
the new
de los
resorts
nuevos
that you're
hoteles
building, about
y
energy management,
gestión
changes
energética,
in temperature
cambios
of
de
rooms. Sometimes you get
temperatura en
into
las
rooms,
piezas.
in conference room where you've got 18 degrees and
A
everyone is
veces
freezing
uno
to
va
death, and
a una
in fact you can
conferencia,
have much
tiene
more
una
efficient way of doing things.
temperatura de
And I think in
18
hotels,
grados, todo el mundo tiene
a
frío,
study of the
podría
green
ser mucho más
economy, tourism in the
eficaz.
green economy
Yo
done by
creo
the
que un
WTO
estudio
was
para los
demonstrated this is where
hoteles
the maximum gain is possible, and there is already quite a good progress. But as I mentioned before, the contribution comes mostly from transport. And in transport, this is where it's a bit more difficult to get some efficiencies and reduce the amount of emissions. And finally, this is what we call the Davos process. We had a big conference in 2007 in Davos, where they studied climate change and tourism responding to global challenges, and then a number of booklets. We basically participated in side events. The conference of the parties, as they called, they were negotiating. I was in many of them. Copenhagen in 2009, there was a lot of expectations of a big agreement. 70 heads of states were there. I never saw so many together, but there was no agreement. Finally, 2015 in Paris, as you know, there has been an agreement. Unfortunately, there has been United States withdrawing from this agreement, but still, I believe that was good progress done. And this is show how tourism has been participating in this process. And so I will end there. This is just to set a bit the scene. And before we actually start with the intervention of the panelists, I would like to show you what I believe is a very inspirational video by the poet Kathy Jettner, very difficult to pronounce. And this is a video and a poem that was presented, in fact, at the conference of the party in 2014. And I believe that will inspire us for the forthcoming discussion. Thank you.
Y es importante para nuestra discusión.
Dear Matafele Benum, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as the Buddha. Your thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Matafele Benum, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of your seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too, will wander rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Matafele Benum, don't cry. Mommy promises you, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas. No backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals. No blindfolded bureaucracies gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of Fiji, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here. Because baby, we are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, Jimma, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and floods of Pakistan, Algeria, and Colombia, and hurricanes, tidal waves, and earthquakes didn't exist, still, there are those who see us. Hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the rich, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers dreaming, designing, building, artists painting, dancing, writing. We are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the street, marching with signs, hand in hand, chanting for change now. They're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us. Because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Mata Filipino, you are eyes heavy with drowsy weight. So just close those eyes, baby, and sleep in peace. Because we won't let you down. You'll see.
Así que vamos a empezar nuestro panel. Vamos a empezar el señor Blake
from the Canadian Arctic.
El Ártico canadiense. Ustedes saben que es el impacto en el extremo norte y el extremo sur es muy grande, sobre todo las culturas que viven ahí. Y vamos a hablar de cómo se está siendo percibiendo y cómo se impacta el turismo en la medida que eso sucede en Yukon. Muchas gracias. Es un gran placer estar aquí en Chile. Y estoy muy entusiasmado en hablar aquí de un tema que me apasiona. Me siento que estoy yendo de un polo al otro. Desde cerca del polo norte a cerca del polo sur.
It's a climate change in general that has a lot of impacts around the globe. People, I think anybody who turns on the news can see the impacts that climate change is having right now. People can see it right in front of them in their local communities. So I'd like to talk a bit about the Arctic because it's something that Arctic. Well, first of all, I think Arctic tourism is something that's a little bit of it's a newer, probably a newer concept. Canada is one. It's on the Arctic Council. It's one of the many countries that has that does have Arctic. Is part of the Arctic. And I think to understand the impact, to start to understand the impact that climate change has on the Arctic and on tourism in the Arctic, I think it's important to understand a little bit about the Arctic too. So again, it's a big topic to cover, but I'll try to kind of make a few points just to give a better understanding. So Canada is the second largest country based on geography in the world, and over 30% of Canada's landmass is north of 60, which consists of Arctic and subarctic regions. Now, if you think about that, so over 30% of the second largest country, but less than 1% of Canada's 36 million residents live in this part of the country. So it's actually quite a small population. And many of the people who live in the far north are indigenous peoples with roots tracing back thousands of years. They still rely heavily on the environment in order to maintain their cultural practices, including hunting, fishing, transportation, and in some cases shelter. The Arctic is in the spotlight quite a bit when it comes to climate change because we're an early indicator. I think canary in the coal mine. A lot of the impacts that you're seeing with climate change around the globe, they're happening at a faster rate in the Arctic. They're happening at a rate that people can almost see it right in front of their eyes, and it's a consistent thing. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the impacts that people are seeing in just a second. There's one of the big things that I'd like to talk about. Happened last year, and it made international news, but it was kind of a short story. So there was a river that was created from glacial melt in the Haines Junction region in the Kelowna region of Yukon, and a river that had taken thousands of years to develop from a melting glacier changed direction in 4 days. So if you think about that, thousands of years creating this river from a glacial melt, and in 4 days, from May 26th to May 29th, 2016, the river just changed direction. So it's something that it's got scientists just baffled. It's things like that are really kind of starting to shock and surprise people, and really just highlighting the gravity of the situation. And the fact that we are seeing these changes. The other thing is permafrost melt. Now in the far north, a lot of houses are built on stilts because the permafrost, you can't just build right on the ground, because if the permafrost thaws, then it starts to sink. The permafrost, when it melts, it traps organic material when permafrost freezes, it traps organic material in the ground, and when it thaws, it releases methane, which is 25% more potent than carbon dioxide. So we kind of have a double problem there with buildings, infrastructure, things like that tourism relies on in the north, being affected by this melt, but also at the same time really intense gases being released that intensify climate change and global warming. So this is also an issue. I think when it comes to tourism, people talk about the ingredients you need for a good tourism operation. It comes down to tourism maps. That's the acronym for it. So marketing, access, product, and staffing. And one of the big things that's happening with climate change and the impact it's having on the north is that access. Things are becoming a lot more accessible. Communities and regions that have never really had a lot of traffic, a lot of people interested in going there. It's opening access to for example, I think it was last year or the year before, was the first cruise ship in the far north. Before, it was all ice. You couldn't get a ship through there. Now you have thousands of people that could potentially be going to communities that are not used to seeing more than just the people from their communities. So it's the impact that's going to have on the environment, on the culture. There could be some benefits to the economy, but it really is a bit of a mixed bag right now in terms of perception. It's something that these communities are talking about, they're struggling with, they're trying to figure out how to see this. There is a split whether or not people see it as a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's just going to come down to how things are planned out. So I don't want to take up too much more time, but that's kind of scratching the surface there.
Thank you, Blake. I think you raised a point which is I also was confronted when climate change creates opportunities. How you have to look at it from the ethical point of view. Because, as you say, now you have routes that have been open. It's not only in tourism. You've got routes even for transatlantic and commerce that have been open. So how one should look at it. I remember there was a case, for example, when there was announced that the population of polar bear will be reduced, you had a threefold increase of passengers wanting to see the polar bear. And so that accelerated the problem. So how you see, you mentioned opportunities, but how you see some of the negative effect that climate change has had in your area, in Yukon?
I would say, I mean, I think that the introduction of cruise ships also mean that there's also increased interest in exploration, so resource extraction, and these are things that we've been hearing about, companies moving in to see if they can get at the resources that they'd never had access to before. So that's something that's being considered. But in terms of the direct impact on tourism, there's changes in wildlife patterns. So if you think about, it's interesting, in the Arctic you see how everything is really interconnected. Ice flows, so the ice that was once completely frozen, because it's warming up and thawing, you have less ice that travels down the river in the spring, and what that ice does, it scratches along the riverbank and creates opportunities for lichen to grow. Because it's more water than ice now, that lichen isn't growing, and so the feeding grounds for the animals like caribou they're changing their migratory patterns. This is a problem for local hunters, people that are interested in coming for wildlife viewing, people that are interested in coming for outfitting opportunities. It also impacts fishing. So everything is really kind of interconnected that way. Obviously, the impact on roads and buildings from permafrost, when things are, I mean, we have roads that look like roller coasters because of the melting of permafrost. You're driving along like this, and it's fun if that's what you're looking for. But it's the roads are something that can obviously have a big impact on the amount of traffic that go through. I would also just say that the fires and floods, storms that these are things that impact everybody everywhere, and I think that we've seen just recently in the Atlantic with the hurricanes, like the impact that has. But we're in the north, especially fire is something that we're very concerned about. Even down to dog sledding, tourism activities in the wintertime. I guess on the plus side, you could see the high season being extended, so warmer season maybe longer. But on the flip side, for winter tourism, for people that want to do dog sledding, I mean, the amount of snow is getting less, the season's shorter for that. So there's a bit of give and take there.
Good, thank you. I remember about snow, just quickly, there was a study done by the OECD regarding the ski stations in Europe, and there was a calculation, but by every 0.5 degrees of growth, you have 200 or 300 ski stations basically closing down, especially at the middle altitude, so to see how strong can the impact be. Okay, so now we go from the far north to the far south, and we have Peter Muck with us, who has been doing researches on climate change adaptation in Chile. So, Peter, can you let us know, first of all, how you see the situation in Chile here, and what will be the possible impact on tourism, the interrelation between climate change and tourism?
Bueno, muchas gracias, Luigi. Muy buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Peter Muck, soy alemán. Trabajo desde hace 6 años en el Ministerio de Medio Ambiente en la División de Cambio Climático, donde por ley, digamos, estamos obligados a desarrollar políticas, estrategias en temas de cambio climático, especialmente en adaptación y mitigación frente a esta problemática. Bueno, nosotros tenemos proyecciones bastante probables, digamos, como en Chile hasta el fin del siglo o hasta la mitad del siglo, digamos 2050, va a cambiar el clima. Esta información ustedes pueden bajar desde su celular. Hay una página que se llama Base Digital del Clima, una sola palabra, Base Digital del Clima, .mma, es Ministerio de Medio Ambiente, .gov.cl, Y allá nosotros hemos puesto a la información del público, científicos, etcétera, qué pasaría, digamos, referente a precipitación y temperatura en las regiones, provincias y comunas a nivel nacional de Chile. Entonces, con esta aplicación ustedes hasta pueden saber qué pasa en Coyhaique más o menos dentro de 50 años. En términos generales, en Chile como en todo el mundo, habrá cambios en temperatura y precipitación. Y este genera, digamos, algunos otros impactos indirectos por combinación de ambos. La precipitación en Chile, digamos, va a bajar en todo el país, del norte hasta el sur, hasta un 15%. Entonces, esto va a afectar especialmente la zona central, donde, digamos, la gran mayoría de los 17.3 millones de chilenos, según el último censo, viven. Una excepción es el extremo sur, la región de Magallanes, donde habrá un ligero aumento en la precipitación. Temperatura va a aumentar en todo el país entre un 2 hasta un 3 grados, más fuerte, digamos, en la zona cordillera que en la zona de la costa. Y este naturalmente va a generar impactos, por ejemplo, sobre la línea de la nieve en las cordilleras, o la isoterma de 0 grados, de tal manera que si yo tengo un aumento en 3 grados, y tomando en cuenta que por 0.6 grados, cada 100 metros disminuye la temperatura, entonces habrá una diferencia máxima de algunos 500 metros entre la línea de nieve de ahora y en el futuro. Y 500 metros es bastante distancia y nos podemos imaginar que algunos de los famosos y conocidos ski resorts de Chile podrían tener problemas. No solamente en Chile, ¿no? Argentina, Bariloche, etcétera, etcétera. Entonces, aumento de la temperatura, reducción de la precipitación. Aumento de la temperatura y reducción de precipitación también generan sequías muy prolongadas, que Chile, por ejemplo, ha experimentado entre fines del 16 y 17, se llama mega sequía, y esta ha sido acompañado por enormes incendios forestales, los más fuertes en toda la historia de Chile. Algunas 600.000 hectáreas han sido afectados. Entonces, este también se puede identificar como una consecuencia indirecta, digamos, del cambio climático. Otro fenómeno del cambio climático, y ese es algo nuevo, porque temperatura y precipitación ya siempre existe, es el aumento del nivel del mar. Sobre el IPCC cada medio año corrige sus predicciones, en verdad no sabemos exactamente hasta dónde va a subir el nivel del mar, se trabaja más o menos con 1 metro hasta fines del siglo. Entonces, este podría tener o va a tener implicaciones para las capitales regionales en la costa, 9 de los 15 capitales regionales son en la costa, y allá, digamos, en un futuro más o menos cerca se debería prepararse, digamos, de enfrentar este desafío que el nivel del mar y con este también los eventos de mareas altas, etcétera, etcétera, va a generar un impacto. De importancia especial es este para la isla de Pascua. Bueno, es una isla bastante lejos del continente, algunos 3.700 kilómetros en el océano. Y allá, ustedes saben que creo que el mayor atractivo de la isla son las estatuas ancestrales, moais, como se llaman, y esta es la causa seguramente principal, porque miles y miles de turistas van allá. Y estos moais básicamente están colocados en la zona costera. Y allá, digamos, el aumento del nivel del mar va a generar, y los oleajes van a generar una erosión de esta costa, y con esto pone en peligro, digamos, los sitios donde actualmente están estos moais. Ya han relocalizado 15 de ellos, entonces este es un problema muy particular, muy especial para esta isla, que tiene que ver con este fenómeno que es nuevo para prácticamente todo el mundo, que el nivel del mar va a subir. Estos son más o menos los impactos básicos que podemos tener aquí en Chile, pero paralelamente, aunque la precipitación, digamos, acumulado con promedio anual va a bajar, parece paradojo que los eventos extremos de lluvias torrenciales van a aumentar. Porque aunque la cantidad total por año disminuye un poquitito, si esta cantidad, digamos, cae en algunos pocos días, entonces este genera tremendas inundaciones. Este también hemos visto en Chile, digamos, en los últimos años, desde el norte hasta el sur, el norte, por ejemplo, en la región de la Antofagasta, digamos, aluviones generados por las lluvias torrenciales en la región de las cordilleras. Santiago, cada vez cuando cae una lluvia fuerte ya hay barrios que están inundados, hay postes de electricidad, digamos, que no funcionan. Entonces, esta predicción general del IPCC que una manifestación del cambio climático son las tendencias, subir o bajar, otros son, digamos, el aumento en frecuencia y magnitud de los eventos extremos. Entonces, vamos a tener en Chile también. También relacionado con aumento de la temperatura, vamos a tener en las grandes ciudades, donde hay estas llamadas islas de calor, porque hay puro cemento en algunas zonas, vamos a tener olas de calor bastante incómodo, hasta peligroso, digamos, para la gente que está allá, incluyendo turistas nacionales e internacionales. Entonces, en términos generales, resumiendo, esta serie de impactos generales y sus indirectos van a causar en alguna manera un tipo de incomodidades o problemas, digamos, para el turismo, especialmente cuando yo pienso, digamos, en esta clase de incendios forestales. Si hay un turismo que le gusta ir a los bosques, hacer su barbecue allá, su fogata o algo así, va a ser prácticamente imposible, prohibido, digamos, en el futuro, ¿no? Aparte de tenemos en Chile, y eso no tiene nada que ver con cambio climático, fenómenos particulares como las erupciones volcánicas y los tsunamis, los terremotos que frecuentemente están presentes. Yo me acuerdo que el año pasado tuvimos que interrumpir varias actividades en el sur de Chile porque hubo prohibición de vuelos por la erupción del volcán en Osorno, ¿no? Creo. Entonces, estas son características del país a las cuales se agregan componentes que tienen que ver con el cambio climático. Entonces, hay que ser consciente de esto, pero eso no significa que uno dice, bueno, ya, mejor no nos vamos, ¿no? Como tú dices, lo más flexible en adaptación es el turista porque se va donde la cosa es bonita y no se va donde la cosa es problemática. De ninguna manera es así, ¿no? Pero conocer los detalles, conocer las proyecciones, siempre es una buena información.
Thank you, Peter. I think that was very comprehensive analysis, and probably because of the geography of Chile, basically all the impacts of climate change are taking place in this country, you know, because of the geology. How you see the level of conscience, both in the public and the private sector, about the impact of climate change, and how you see sensitivity and willingness about adaptations and mitigation strategies. You see that your analysis, which is quite lucid, is perceived by the people here and by the authorities, and are enough measures being taken, or how do you see or what needs to be done in the immediate future?
Sí, yo creo que hay una alta conciencia, digamos, de la presencia del cambio climático en general, pero también, digamos, de los impactos climáticos que con cambio climático o no cambio climático están existentes. Entonces, nuestro Ministerio de Medio Ambiente está realizando cada año una encuesta, digamos, entre otros, preguntando cómo la percepción del público sobre el cambio climático. Y la última encuesta, digamos, del año pasado demuestra que el 85% de los encuestados consideran que el cambio climático es el tema principal de estos tiempos. Comparando eso con una estadística de los Estados Unidos, allá como promedio es un 50%, ¿no? Entonces hay diferentes niveles de conciencia, de preocupación sobre esta temática. Pero para tocar este tema, ¿cómo Chile se va a preparar, digamos, para estos cambios climáticos? El cambio climático es tema de la política ambiental chilena desde el 93, cuando Chile firmó la Convención Marco de las Naciones Unidas de Cambio Climático, publicando una serie de documentos, de planes, cómo afrontar este fenómeno. Nos tenemos el Plan Nacional de Adaptación al Cambio Climático del 2014 y tenemos el nuevo Plan de Acción Nacional de Cambio Climático que recién salió hace tres meses. Y tenemos también compromisos internacionales de Chile frente a la Comisión Marco de las Naciones Unidas, que en su tiempo se llaman INDC. Hoy día ya no son más intended actions, sino ya el Congreso de Chile aprobó, que Chile presentó en la conferencia del COP21 2015 en París. El Congreso la aprobó y aquí Chile se compromete con una serie de actividades. En mitigación significa reducir las emisiones del impacto climático y de adaptación. Bueno, en general Chile es un país que contribuye con un 0.2% a las emisiones generales y no es un gran culpable en esto. Sin embargo, en los INDCs, Chile se compromete a reducir las emisiones en un 30% hasta el 2030, porque se llama 30-30, comparado con los niveles del 2007 en mitigación. También se compromete en mitigación a reforestar 100.000 hectáreas, digamos, con bosques, que tienen una capacidad de captar el CO2 de más o menos 200.000 toneladas de equivalente CO2 al año. En adaptación, Chile va a tener o ya tiene en parte 9 planes sectoriales de adaptación, de los cuales ya tenemos de adaptación al cambio climático, de los cuales ya tenemos 4 para el sector silvo-agropecuario, para el sector biodiversidad, para el sector pesca, agricultura y para el sector salud. Los primeros 3 yo he tenido el honor de coordinar y ahora estoy en la coordinación del plan de adaptación para ciudades, que también es, digamos, importante en este gran tema del turismo. Y vamos a tener en el año que viene el plan de adaptación al cambio climático para turismo. Entonces, este forma parte de la política pública chilena, no del gobierno, sino del Estado, digamos, para enfrentar este fenómeno de diferentes maneras. Y fin de este año vamos a formar un grupo de trabajo interministerial para elaborar este plan de adaptación para el sector de turismo, juntos con el Ministerio de Economía, donde está Cernatur, y otros, digamos, componentes o stakeholders, digamos, en este sector. Entonces, el año que viene ya vamos a detallar cómo se debería enfocar actividades en esta temática cambio climático turismo en Chile.
Thank you. Just take this opportunity, as you mentioned about the plan, that the GSTC criteria, in fact, explicitly provides both in the industry criteria, the former hotel and tour operators, and the destination criteria, that on the first case, any establishment needs to have a plan and a way of measuring the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, both at the level of hotel or establishment or at the level of the destinations, that the destinations are on top the responsibility of involving all the different subsectors, transports, hotels, etc., in order to first be able to record the emissions and second to have a plan of adaptation. One of the biggest problems is, I mentioned the study was done by UNWTO, but since then I'm not aware of any study being done, and I think if you are not able to measure the emissions, you're not able to manage them. This is clear. And there are only a few examples. I think the Griffith Institute and the Surrey University are working, and I saw some of their statistics, but the amount of, let's say, both transport actors like cruise ship or air companies, and amount of hotel is still relatively minor. And also the problem is that they don't use the same metrics, so sometimes it's difficult to compare. So I think at the level of the tourists, the next big challenge and task is to have a system that is able to measure in a way that is homogeneous and to compare and see indeed if this table that was done in 2007, I would look like maybe in 2-3 years from now, and if indeed tourism was able to reduce its contribution to the climate change. Okay, now we move to Europe, and we have Ioannis with us. I think European Union is probably at the conference of the parties is normally one of the most advanced. Europe has been setting clear target for many years of reductions of emissions by 2020, by 2030. How does reflect on the tourism industry in tourism, you that are in Europe and working on the tourism? How you see that relation? Is there a communication between the two? Please, Ioannis, you have the floor.
Yes. Okay. So, thank you very much for the question. I think Europe is, for our side, is the leader on that, let's say, mission, because in the other side of, let's say, the coin, we have to deliver. And we hope that, we hope that the measures that they have taken in a top level, like the European Commission, together with all the member states, are very strong. They are giving, let's say, the message to the people. Until today, we have already established two main packages. We call it climate change packages, okay, climate packages. One is going to expire in 2020. It was related with decrease of greenhouse gas emissions, which was 20% decrease compared with 1999. So until 2020, we have to decrease 20% of the greenhouse gas. 20% we have to deliver on the mixture with renewables, and 20% increase of energy efficiency. So this was the message. And the new package says that until 2030, we have to increase this 20% of decrease of greenhouse to 40%. And this is going to be 80% until 2050. This is not, let's say, voted, but this is, let's say, direction. For energy efficiency, it's going to be 24% increase. And for renewables, it's going to be 24 also. So, as you maybe know, in Europe, sometimes it's a lot of bureaucracy, but we have a lot of discuss, and we have, let's say, taken a lot of hard decisions about climate change. I was actually working with a group from the Greek government with UNFCCC in order to deliver some deliverables according to Kyoto Protocol, the formal, let's say, agreement about climate change. And it was amazing because, you know, there's so many different approaches in the European Union about countries. They have different kinds of approaches, I mean, the north and the south. But at the end, we have to give something to the citizens, and I think the outcomes are very, very helpful. And promising. So, according to the tourism, I think there is a big discussion about this in European Union. Of course, sometimes, or probably most of the times, the legislation is behind the real, let's say, facts. We can see now, I mean, this summer in the Mediterranean area, in the south part of Europe, there was a lot of fires. You can imagine what happened in Portugal. Portugal was a very big deal with fires, and Spain and Greece, and many, many other cases I can say. The connection with tourism is very strong because, as you can imagine, we're talking about, first of all, biodiversity, especially for places which are very related with water, like Greece. I mean, all the part of Mediterranean area are very, let's say, sensitive to that, and there are a lot of indications about how the biodiversity is pressurized about this. Of course, also all this discussion about what is the percentage of traveling, what's the percentage of hotels, accommodation, what's the percentage of all the others. Of course, there's a big discussion. Behind this, I suppose I agree about monitoring and measuring all these greenhouse gases. And this is something which is very, very important for all the studies that we have made in several places in Europe, but not only Europe. I think a big deal is, and very good deliverables came from all the pre-Kyoto, post-Kyoto actions related with flexible mechanisms. They have delivered a lot of beautiful methodologies that are available in the UNFCCC website. You can find over there how you can measure a lot of, let's say, processes in industrial, in many other, let's say, sectors, but also in tourism. You can find a lot of things. The very important thing in tourism, at least in Europe, is the infrastructure, and what is going to be the climate change effect on infrastructure. It seems that it's going to be a lot of effect on hotels which are near the coastline, because in the next years, if we have the scenario of 2 degrees or 2.5 degrees increase, then it's going to be, we're going to lose some parts of the coastline. So we have to find all the best, let's say, tools for mitigation and adaptation about this. Of course, there are opportunities behind this, even in tourism, because you can see a lot of new, let's say, services, very new technologies related also with energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is something that in many cases, not only in the Mediterranean area, only in Europe, it's an issue. Even here it's an issue because right here in this place we have a very nice, let's say, heating system, very nice lighting system, but outside we can find some places that we have the same problem also in Greece or in other countries, which is called energy poverty, which is also present in many cases in areas that the tourists are coming. We have to deliver the product. We don't have the infrastructure. I mean, most of the accommodation in the Mediterranean countries are only focused on summer. So what about the period of the tourism in Europe? How we can extend the period and not have a very big peak on, let's say, the August in Mediterranean. So this is something that I think many tools are over there. We have to find the financial tools behind, actually, how we're going to pressure and to help the people and, of course, the private sector to implement these technologies, because some years ago they were very, very expensive, like, let's say, 10 years ago the renewables, but now also the energy efficiency is not very expensive. So I think the future is promising on that, but there should be policies, and the policies should, let's say, support this private and public sector collaboration. This is my...
Thank you, Ioannis. In fact, I mentioned the study of the Greek tourism in the green economy, and I think the scenarios presented there were in line with what you said. First of all, it's relatively simple to reconvert and to be more efficient, and I think a very important message that the rate of return of investment was very low. It was calculated that in an average of 2 years, an hotel that invests in LED lighting or in better air conditionings, in 2 years recovers the invested money, and also the third year gains money. So this is good for the business and good for the environment. Now, a question a bit unrelated, but we were grateful for Green Evolutions to take care of carbon offsetting. Can you explain exactly how this carbon offsetting works? I mean, where these dollars go? How do they actually compensate for the emissions that we are producing when we're taking our flight?
Yeah, okay. I will try to make it as simple as possible because in reality, the carbon offset or carbon neutrality, like we say in these markets, it's something that relates, let's say, the pressure that, let's say, all these policies from Kyoto and afterwards came towards to give some new technologies, some greener technologies, some technologies that are more friendly to, let's say, to the environment in the market. So the carbon offset is something which is the last part of other steps that we have to take. For example, first of all, we have, let's say that we have this event, okay? And we have all over the world, people are coming here from many connection flights. We have discussing all these days about the connection flights and all this stuff. So first of all, we have, for this event, to calculate or to evaluate with assumptions, and the question is how many assumptions that we're making, what is the carbon footprint of this event? Because we have to measure something. So this is, we call it measure or monitoring. When we have done this, then we have to go and make a kind of reporting, which is going to be official or not official, depends from the, let's say, commitment that the organization has against legislation or, let's say, something which is more, let's say, not a demand. And the third one, we have to do something in order to minimize that in the future, or let's say to have some measures before, like we don't have paper actually. More or less we don't give paper, only the bag and some small papers for the, let's say, for the restaurant, for the menu, and that's it. So from the earliest event to this event, we have decreased a lot of things. These are actions. Of course, you cannot decrease many things, like the traveling, or we cannot, let's say that we are going to have less international, let's say, visitors to this event or the other. But okay, we can have some, let's say, instructions to the travelers in general. So when we have decrease in a level, then we have something that is remaining. The remaining is greenhouse gases. It is equivalent tons of CO2. So let's say the world after Kyoto Protocol or before Kyoto Protocol, using some kind of called flexible mechanism, says that if you would like to make something about which is, let's say, the greenhouse gas that we have emitted, and would like to decrease, but it's not very, let's say, financial, let's say, possible to do it in the best way, we can, let's say, give the money or some money to a technology transformation in another place of the world in order to do the opposite effect. Let's say that it's going to be some kilowatt hours of electricity in China, and we want to transform that from coal to renewables. So in order to do that, the carbon credits, that is, let's say, the word that we are using, is, let's say, some helping financial support to this. So using this flexible mechanism, we invest by offsetting to this kind of energy transforming to the greener technology. So this is about the offsetting. And the big difference in the market, because you can see in many sectors like the aviation, you can go inside and say, I would like to go from this part of the world to this part of the world, and this is, let's say, the carbon that you're going to emit. Some companies have some tools to calculate and then to make offset, to make carbon neutral. The big difference in the market is who is giving the maximum transparency on this. To whom this money are going. And I have to say that using the methodology that we have delivered for this event, in the end of the event, some days after the event, because we have to calculate and make offsetting, etc., we're going to create a certification that you can have all the story from the calculation to the project in the world somewhere. We're going to find which one is the best, and which is the project, where is the project, which is the lot of carbon credits that have been delivered, and you can see that on a registry. So everything is, let's say, verified, because the trick behind that is what is verified and what is not, and what is transparent and what is not. And this is the value behind that. This procedure, in order to invest in green technology, is not only for events, it's also for airports. Maybe if someone came from Liverpool or for Athens like me, they are inside the ACA system, which is a system that makes the same steps for airports. So you can imagine businesses, you can imagine services, you can imagine products, everything. So it's a matter of how you can invest in green or more green technologies, your money, in order to make something against what you have created, because we have to be here and discuss.
Thank you, Ioannis. I appreciate your explanation, though I've been in this business for a while. It's not always easy to understand.
Yeah,
but it's basically you create emissions and put the money to a project that compensates somehow. The simple way to say you plant trees, and the trees, they basically capture CO2. So this is maybe a simple way of explaining on how you do it. But thank you again for your support of green evolution in that. So now, Gwendal, you come from southern part of Canada, so you definitely have a different experience. And I know that I think one important part of your story is that you've used an important event, which is the Olympic Games, to basically initiate a new strategy about climate change. So can you please tell us something more about that?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on the panel today. I guess what I'll do is talk about the context of Vancouver and where the conversation in the city has really been fortunate to be one that's very been ahead of the curve for the most part. And it really starts way back in the 1970s when, I don't know if many of you realize this, but Greenpeace was formed in Vancouver in the mid-70s. And the original motivation was to oppose whaling in the North Pacific, and the organization then eventually moved on and moved their offices, I believe, to the Netherlands. But it really gives you a sense of the sense of environmental consciousness in Vancouver, of being a place that was really ahead of the curve in that sense of consciousness. As the discussions around climate change really came to, I would say, almost an international peak in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, 2007. It was exactly at the time that Vancouver had announced that they had won the bid for the 2010 Winter Olympic Games. And so we had a confluence of a few things happening at the same time. One was the provincial government for our region creating a climate action plan, which stipulated a 33% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from 2007 levels. And one of the actions put in to do that was to implement a carbon tax in British Columbia, which was the first carbon tax in North America. So that set the stage. And as we were leading up to the Olympics, this discussion was very strong. And so Vancouver decided, as its management plan, to try and be the greenest games to date, as well as to be 100% carbon neutral. So to use the mechanism of offsets for the games. So this was happening, and obviously for Tourism Vancouver, for the tourism community, the Olympic Games was seen as a tremendous opportunity. It was something that, although as you all know, Olympic Games are always a controversial event in whatever location they are in. The tourism community saw this as a real opportunity to put Vancouver on the stage, and the context of trying to be the greenest games really shaped the conversation. And this led to some partnership with the local electrical utility in Vancouver, which manages electricity production in the whole region. And in following the games, we created a energy management program that was sponsored by the utility to work specifically with tourism businesses in the destination on energy conservation programs. And this project lasted for 4 years and involved me, working with tourism businesses, identifying preliminary assessments to identify energy conservation opportunities, and then connecting them with suppliers and practitioners that could help them implement those changes. And we found through that program, what we discovered in looking at the emissions from businesses, that although tourism businesses, the inventory of businesses in Vancouver accounted for about 11% of the businesses in the city, the emissions from tourism businesses accounted for about 26% of emissions in the city. So we were essentially overrepresented in greenhouse gas emissions. And so that also sort of was a big part of a motivation to do our part in Vancouver. And at the same time, following the Olympic Games, the City of Vancouver initiated a very broad-based public consultation on where it wanted to go on environmental initiatives and particularly on climate change. So for a whole year, there was a very comprehensive consultation with the public as to what kind of goals we wanted to set for ourselves, where did we want to, how much did we want to challenge ourselves, and that led to the creation of the Greenest City Action Plan, which had 10 goals and set a very, very ambitious goal to try and be the greenest city by 2020, and so. You can imagine that the tourism business community cannot live in a vacuum, and so we had to engage with this process, and that led to Tourism Vancouver creating a tourism master plan in 2013, which also consulted with the local community and the business community in Vancouver, and created space to make commitments to support and make that linkage between the Greenest City Action Plan, which was a real public sector government initiative, to one that where we saw there was an advantage as far as the marketing and positioning of the city to support those goals and continue to find ways for our business community to help meet the goals and make a commitment to those goals to 2020. And so some of the things that we have done in that capacity is we started to benchmark our hotels. So as many of you are probably aware, in a destination, hotels are usually very competitive on price and room rates, and they get reports on their occupancy, and they know exactly what everybody else is doing in the destination. They have very sophisticated and near real-time metrics on each other's occupancy. And so one of the things we saw is, how come we're not doing that on energy use and on the some of the other metrics of costs for hotels that they see as to some degree as fixed costs. You know, when somebody does their planning and say, okay, this was how much energy we used in 2014, we're going to plan, maybe we've set a goal, we're going to try and reduce it by 5%, but we're just going to transfer over and say that's our budget for energy for the next year. And so this benchmarking, for the first time, we weren't able to make each hotel public, but what we were able to do is share the data in an aggregate or anonymized fashion. And so they were, every hotel, particularly in the downtown core, was able to see what was their energy performance compared to their peers, and create sort of a little bit more of an understanding of the competitive environment that they worked in, because that energy after labor costs is one of the largest costs in the operations. But we also saw that as a not necessarily somewhere an area where you need to compete, but where you can also collaborate. And so we brought together all the facility managers, the chief engineers, directors of engineering in large tourism facilities in the city, hotels, convention center, attractions, to come together and share best practices. And so we coordinate quarterly meetings for them to be able to speak to their initiatives, what they have done, how successful it's been for them, and then if one chief engineer says, oh, I've done this project, worked with this contractor, and it's worked really well for me, and he tells that to their peers, those changes are much, much faster to spread, because everybody else wants to do that too. If he says, oh, that saved me 10% on my natural gas use and those kinds of things. I'll just close with the leading up to the Paris Accord. The city of Vancouver saw another opportunity to try and put its step forward and lead again, and set a target of being 100% renewable by 2050. And this is and they're part of a C40 alliance of cities, large cities in the world. And so this is really where we are now looking to how are we going to work with that, with these new goals, which are very ambitious. They're very close to the European goals of for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and how this is going to affect tourism businesses to be able to move, in particular areas like food service, where the need to use natural gas for cooking is still very strong, and there aren't necessarily as many alternative uses. As far as impacts in the region, just very quickly, sea level rise is a clear one. In Vancouver, we have a seawall. It's a public pathway that is about 28 kilometers long and is one of our largest public attractions in the city. And already with storms, we've seen that with storm surges, the impact to that infrastructure, there's been significant damage on several years. On seafood, we're seeing the rise in temperature in the region affecting oysters, affecting the return of salmon into rivers, which is affecting the wildlife population for bears, but also for the resident orcas, whales in the region. And so our whale watching operations are at high risk of no longer having a product that is available for visitors. Most recently this summer, we've had significant forest fires which have displaced over 45,000 people in the province, but also when seen from abroad, if you're told that there's a forest fire in a region, it's very difficult to differentiate one valley from the other. And so regions that weren't even affected with the forest fire, we're seeing had a significant decrease in visitor volume. So it has a significant impact on tourism.
Thank you very much, Gwendal. DMOs you mentioned, I mean, Randy showed a slide that they should be presented all throughout the conference about the importance of management destinations. And in the panel yesterday, we also heard how important it is, the example of Riviera Maya. In 1 minute, because we're running out of time, on this competition, cooperation and competition, what was the problem you found in putting together hoteliers and others that probably they were more competing to each other? How did you create a space for cooperation? Or what was the problem you found there? Just telegraphic response.
Yeah, I think particularly it's the wanting to protect their data. So we really, when we did the benchmarking, we really had to tell them that their individual data would not be shared with their competitors, so that if it's a Westin and there's a Hyatt, the Westin wouldn't find out exactly how much energy the Hyatt was using, but that it would be anonymized. So that was one key piece, is they're willing to share as long as it doesn't go too far. And then the other piece is that there's value. So if we were able to bring particularly the facility managers together to convince their general managers that it was worth it, they really needed to show that they were going to access and learn about strategies that they could then apply and to their own facilities, or identify opportunities that can be addressed by collaboration and would not be able to be addressed individually.
So very important, the role of a facilitator, the one that role you were playing, to make sure that let's say that there is an understanding of the advantages that everyone will get, and somehow you reassure them about not having negative impacts on their business. So I think this is, again, I think, reconfirmed the importance of the DMO and having, let's say, an organization that puts all the interests together and is led, of course, towards the principle of sustainability, which is what we're basically pushing now. So let's see if we have now a few minutes for some questions or interventions. Is anyone from the floor would like to take? I know that Rosa passed from Cayman Islands, yes. Of course, small islands are among the most affected territories of climate change. I have to put my hand here because I've got the light like a police interrogatory here. But please, Rosa, could you say a few words? Can you give her a microphone, please?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. It's very insightful. I have two examples of mitigation. As I would have shared yesterday evening, diving is very important to our tourism industry, being able to see a healthy marine life. And we have seen with the rise in the temperature of the ocean, coral bleaching and degradation in some areas of coral. On Little Cayman, there is a research center called the Central Caribbean Marine Institute, and they have had a breakthrough recently, was reported this summer, that from fragments of coral, they were able to prove that fragments could spawn. So this is a great breakthrough and development for restoration of coral reefs. One other example that I'd like to share, and it's in our planning and infrastructure legislation. In the past, persons would, or developers could, build as close to the shoreline as they wanted. There was very little restriction. In 2016, that was changed. One, higher buildings had a stronger restriction on the setback from the coastline, and it's on a tiered basis. So I believe the minimum threshold is about 200 feet from the high water mark. Developers cannot build anything within 200 feet of the high water mark on the coastline. So those are just some measures as we see with global warming particularly, and what hurricanes can do. I'm sure that you've seen the news with Hurricane Irma. That is a classic example of rising in temperatures and more very devastating storms being generated. So those are just two examples that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosa, very much. I remember a powerful video that was done by the then president of the Maldives. I think it was at Copenhagen in 2009, that he had a cabinet meeting underwater, or Davos, to show how Maldives and other islands could be in 20, 30 years from now. And I think that video was shown in the plenary, and I think it had a strong impact. Everyone with bottles and under the water signing a statement against climate change. So I have a few questions. Let's see how much we're able. Una pregunta quizás para Peter, viene la pregunta de Ana Romero Aguirre del Comité Turismo de Río León, y pregunta: ¿cómo podríamos medir la huella de carbono en la región de manera simple y práctica? ¿Hay organismos del Estado que nos puedan ayudar? Peter, ¿puedes comentar, por favor?
Sí, nuestro ministerio maneja, digamos, el sistema INGE, ese es Inventario Nacional de los Gases del Efecto Invernadero, que está registrando, digamos, según sector, digamos, su huella de carbono, su cantidad de emisiones. Entonces, en este caso, recomiendo ponerse en contacto con la seremía de nuestro ministerio aquí en Coyhaique para preguntar cómo técnicamente se puede, digamos, entrar en esta clase de brindar información y tomar las medidas adecuadas.
Thank you, Peter. Another question is from Jonathan Tutelo of the Destination Stewardship Center. Yes, one of the worst energy wastes in tourism is excessive air conditioning. On days with a pleasant 23 degrees outside, rooms and restaurants might be having the AC set at 18 or 19. How do we challenge this pervasive way of thinking? Maybe, I don't know, Gwendal or Ioannis, in your meetings with hoteliers, did you discuss also these issues on how you can save energy and how can you set the standards? Maybe you can use mine.
Well, in our context, Vancouver is a city where the temperature is actually very smooth. Air conditioning is not a huge use. Most of our greenhouse gas emissions come in the winter from heating and natural gas use. So for us, it's people setting the temperature too high. But certainly, some of the larger hotels do have air conditioning, and really, one of the strategies that we find that are the best are room occupancy sensors, making sure that when guests are not there, that the whole system shuts down. And also taking advantage of things that what we call as free cooling. So bringing in fresh air at night, and also whenever the outside air temperature allows it, to use that as a preliminary cooling to try and meet the needs. But we generally have central ventilation systems and not packaged air conditioning systems for each room, which is something you'll find much more in other parts of the world.
So, first of all, almost 20 to 30% in order to have the efficiency on this system is awareness. So we have to market, to make the market, the right market, not do, but we have to take you with us to have a common sense and etc. Of course, it's very difficult with people that coming from countries that don't care about spending money for air conditioning. So this is something else. Of course, censoring. Of course, the insulation of the accommodation, let's say, infrastructure is very, very important, whatever you are, because you are losing from everywhere this air conditioning, so you cannot withstand the temperature. But in any case, it's very difficult for people to change behavior from one day to another. So there are a lot of, let's say, strategies inside the house, the hotels that I have already audited or I have already consulted, because it depends from the mixture of people that coming in the hotel with which, let's say, mentality they have. But always there are, let's say, ways to persuade people and persuade them and go out and not stay inside the hotel. So, I mean, you came here not for the hotel mostly, but for the sightseeing and the environment. And so go out, don't stay here. So there are a lot of tricks that you can make. But of course, 19, for example, in Greece we have 30, 35. If you have 19 inside, then it's a thermal shock. So probably you are going to be ill after 2 or 3 days. Okay, so that's another argument.
Thank you. La última pregunta, Natalia Jiménez Orozco de Swiss Contact Colombia. ¿Cuál sería la principal acción que los turistas pueden hacer para mitigar el impacto en las emisiones de viajar en avión? Bueno, we heard from Ioannis about the compensations. Is anything else that can be done? Well, I would say maybe doing the meetings by teleconference. This is a way of doing it, but it's not. I think we often have this dilemma. Sometimes, do I really need to travel to an event, or can I just put the screen? And sometimes it's possible, but I think sometimes I would say that the personal interactions and then knowing the place where you're going, I think is very important as well. So I think that there is a certain balance that need to be stricken between how we contribute to climate change and what I would say is our way of life. We have mechanism like the compensation, the CO2 compensations. But Ioannis, you want to add one more, and that would be just 1 minute, and then we need to close.
For like I said, for events like that, of course, paperless, things that are more, let's say, ecological, less. I mean, the meat is one big thing about creation of greenhouse gas. Okay. So the selection of the menu, what we are using more wireless things and paperless things, less imprinted. If you print it in very friendly way, friendly materials, inks, whatever is going to be that. But of course, there's going to be something in the end remaining. So we have to do something about that. All right. Of course, the selection of the place is something else, but we have to support. We have to deliver the messages. The message. So
yes, when
one of the things also is we do a lot of work with meetings and convention at a convention center, and with some venues, like we're measuring the distance traveled. One thing that the planners can do is also look at where their delegate pool is coming from, and start to look at choosing the cities where they're going to run their events in to try and optimize the total distance traveled. And so that is, it's not so much a decision from the delegate, but it's something that the planner can do as they look at making a decision of where they're going to hold their meetings and see if they can reduce that.
Thank you very much. I think our panel comes to an end. I personally learned a lot, honestly, from all the 4 panelists, and I hope that you did as well. I think it's very difficult to make any conclusion because I think all your statements were pretty clear. The only message I would say, as I said in my speech, we don't need to keep that knowledge here. I mean, that knowledge needs to be spread because I would say this is a leadership in sustainability in tourism, but this has to be trickling down and make sure that the larger industry buys in with all this, with the message that we're not actually losing, not even economically, you are winning, you're getting out of it. So I would say that this would be probably the message. So big round of applause, Peter Muck, Blake Rogers, Ioannis, Pappas, Gwendal, Castellan. Thank you. Now there are three things happening. First of all, is a present be given by the region of Aysen to our panelists. Por favor, quedaros en la habitación porque hay dos cosas más que van a pasar en este momento. Please stay in the room. Right after the delivery of the gift, and thank you, asking then the panelists to leave the stage. We're going to call two of a GSTC country representatives from the region, which is Jorge Mole from Chile and Beatriz Barreal from Mexico. They will sign a memorandum of cooperations of understanding between two important countries in Latin America. We would like this to be the seed of larger cooperations of all countries where GSTC has a presence, and we hope will be all of them in the future. And and of course, we would like other regions, other continents to do the same as well. So we're very pleased that you got to talk together and find common ways and common understanding. So Beatriz and Jorge, welcome.
Bueno, buenos días a todos. Quisiera pedirles primero un gran aplauso para México por el momento que están pasando hoy día, representados hoy día por Beatriz como encuentro global y sobre todo como Chile, que tenemos esta maravillosa relación con este maravilloso país. Creo que te acompañamos, Beatriz, en este momento. Y bueno, contarles un poco que esto es una iniciativa que nace para darle fuerza a Latinoamérica. Es un esfuerzo con Beatriz, estamos trabajando ya hace un tiempo unidos, y con Regenera y Riviera Maya Sostenible creemos que podemos tener el puntapié inicial para lograr algo que después ojalá se animen otros destinos. Latinoamérica tiene que estar unida, tiene que generar valor para todo lo que tenga que ver con la sostenibilidad. Así es que estamos dando un paso más dentro del contexto de GSTC, por lo cual lo agradecemos muchísimo para poder trabajar en conjunto.
Gracias, Jorge, gracias, Luigi, gracias, Randy, gracias a todos ustedes por estar aquí. Como vemos, el planeta nos necesita urgentemente. Tenemos 3 huracanes formados en línea, uno que se ha formado por primera vez en el Golfo de México, lo cual es extraordinario. 3 huracanes en línea, un terremoto de 8.4 en México ayer a las 12 de la noche hora local y una alerta de tsunami en el Pacífico. Necesitamos actuar urgente, necesitamos compartir nuestras experiencias, compartir lo que nos ha salido bien y lo que nos ha salido mal para que otros no cometamos los mismos errores. Gracias, Jorge, por esta oportunidad, gracias, Luigi, gracias, Randy. Y bueno, deseamos que esto sea una capacidad multiplicada. Digo yo que sumar es multiplicar, que esto sea para multiplicar.
Muy bien. Mientras Jorge y Beatriz firman, les anuncio que ahora mismo vamos a hacer una fotografía de grupo con todos los participantes, así que por favor, quedaros en la sala. El moderador nos va a indicar exactamente cómo nos vamos a poner. pero no salir todavía porque ahora hacemos la foto antes de irnos al coffee break y después ya a las sesiones paralelas de la tarde, de la segunda parte de la mañana.
Y nosotros invitamos a Luigi y a Randy, porque son nuestros testigos de honor. Quisiéramos que por favor dejen su firma en este convenio. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Okay.
Muy bien. Falta una y ya.
Okay.
Muy bien. Bueno. Bien, moderador, nos ayuda a ver cómo nos colocamos.
Muy bien. Les voy a pedir que tomen sus asientos, por favor, porque vamos a tomar la foto desde aquí hacia allá. Les pido, por favor, que puedan poner las luces, todas las luces que tenga el salón, solamente los periodistas oficiales. Después la organización podrá hacer llegar la foto a quien guste. Por favor, tomen todo su asiento. Mientras nos ponemos en posición, yo les quiero contar dos cosas. La primera